That man and his manga. For a long time now, I've really wanted to try and do a video that covers as many manga as possible, and I've wanted to talk about some of my favourites. And you know what? I thought I'd reach back into my many years of collecting and talk about some of my favourite manga of all time. Now, this is a list of my personal favourites. I only want to talk about titles that are or have legally been available, and I also don't wish to include any titles that I've read volume 1 of and then gotten no further. I feel it might be rather unfair to judge a series on one volume alone. Of course, as to be expected, there's going to be some very unconventional titles in here that won't make other people's lists. But again, it's my personal choice, and I feel it would be unfair to put a title I don't like in here at all. Honestly, when it came down to it, a lot of these manga I can see ranked ever so slightly above the next one. And quite frankly, all of these on this list are, in my humble opinion, absolute winners. I suppose the first place to start is where a lot of manga fans started, with Dragon Ball. Please be aware when I talk about Dragon Ball, I'm considering both Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. It was, of course, one series in Japan. What can I say about Dragon Ball that thousands of haven't? The story of Son Goku as he tries to locate the several legendary balls in order to summon a dragon and gain wishes before the story loses its adventure narrative and moves more into being all about the fights. Dragon Ball was one of my first Battle Shonen titles and paved the way for so many things to come. While I personally appreciate the adventure side of Dragon Ball rather than the high testosterone fighting of Dragon Ball Z, as a whole, it's still more than fine. Although it's well known that the series was supposed to end so many times before it actually did, I never really felt that the series became terrible. Just sadly, I got a bit tired of it. A slightly controversial title to be on this list, and next up we have Lohina, a title that really stabs me in the nostalgia heart. One of my first manga and one of my first anime, and honestly, a lot of the points go into it for this very reason. A romantic comedy / harem about a young man who makes a promise with a girl to get into Tokyo University, but now he can't remember her name or her face, but he's determined to make it and follow up on that promise. Nostalgia aside, this series really opened my eyes to, again, some tropes that I'll see time and time again. And to be honest, I still feel you can have a bit of fun with this one, even if a lot of it is incredibly dated. The next one is one that I absolutely adored my time with, although that time was only realistically 2 volumes. Teasing Master Takagi-san was the precursor to all of those teasing titles that have been popular as of late, for better or worse. However, wrapped up in this one is a really cute romance story, one that I look forward to reading more into. Unfortunately, as I've said, as of writing, I've only read the first few volumes, so can't realistically put it any higher than I have done. But if you want a light-hearted romantic comedy, then this one is certainly one to consider checking out. Next up we have Jonah of the Dawn, a difficult one for me to place as I've only read the first 3 volumes, but if I'd read more I could definitely see it ranking a lot higher. Mix in action and political intrigue, Jonah of the Dawn tells the story of a young, spoiled princess whom, after witnessing her potential husband murder her father, she escapes and vows to become stronger. I really enjoyed the change of pace in this one, Jonah herself going through an incredible change from early chapters, and honestly, I had an impression that this would be a reverse harem and little more. How wrong I was. It's kind of strange going from a series that really focuses on political aspects to one where the first page questions breast size. But here we are. The first of the 7 series titles to grace this list is Please Tell Me Galkochan. Now, Please Tell Me Galkochan asks some of the more meaningful questions in life, from questioning breast sizes to dispelling myths of the fairer sex. It's certainly not a series that will appeal to everybody, but for those who can get into it, will likely love it. Plus, it gets bonus points for having a unique presentation and art style. Next up we have the wonderfully irrelevant mouthful of a title, Bo 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 Bo. A battle shonen that gave us, if nothing else, the fist of the nose hair. This title is just incredibly stupid, and for me, its biggest drawback was always that Viz never really gave it much of a chance. Only releasing a handful of volumes scattered across the series itself, it's one of those series that is just so wonderfully Japanese, and is a prime example of the strange and bizarre things to come out of the country. I almost never hear anybody talking about this one, but it's worth tracking down the volumes Viz did release and checking this one out, to be honest, especially if you're a fan of comedy manga. Next, I want to talk about Junji Ito, an author whose work is often praised. I like Junji Ito on a whole, however I feel like a lot of his titles are quite frankly hit or miss. If it was standalone, I really likely would have put the Enigma of Amigara Fault on this list. However, I really did not like Gyo, which it was packaged with. Uzumaki, however, is my personal favourite, taking place in the Japanese town of Kuruzo-cho, a town cursed by spirals, and everything is spirals. Junji Ito has a knack of taking an almost absurd concept and running with it, twisting and turning it into a nightmarish narrative. And in Uzumaki it really works so well. While there are some chapters and parts in the story that I feel don't always hit, overall Uzumaki does what it was intended to do, creating a twisted world and story that will stick with you forever. Hail to the spiral. Moving on from spirals and curses to something much more yummy. Incredibly yummy. Food Wars is next up, and it's one that I have a deep personal connection to. Once upon a time having a phobia of food and keeping myself familiar with only British cuisine. Food Wars was the series that broke down that food wall for me and made me fall in love with eating different cuisines. Food series are always just so much fun to enjoy, taking a simple concept such as, eating, and spin it into a narrative that always manages to work for me, and Food Wars not only does that, but adds the usual shonen battles along to it with the logic that if something tastes so good, it'll quite literally blow your clothes off. Something that today I've yet to experience. Guess I need to find somewhere better to eat. The next one is a title that I keep meaning to pick up physically, however sits as a firm favourite in my Shonen Jump app. Astra, Lost in Space is one of those perfect short manga. There's enough mystery and intrigue to keep you going while never outstaying its welcome. As you can expect from its title, it does borrow a lot from the Lost in Space series, in which a crew must travel from planet to planet to try and reach their own home. Of course, there are a lot of character revelations and a huge mystery hanging over them, but this only improves it. It's a series that I feel is, quite frankly, criminally underrated, and at only 5 volumes, I feel a lot more people would enjoy this. If only they would give it a chance. A lot of titles in this lineup are definitely older titles that I read a few years ago, as I feel that recency bias can offset a title you've enjoyed years ago. However, My Dress-Up Darling is one that I feel is definitely worth your time. An awkward boy befriends the popular girl, a story we've seen time and time again. However, in My Dress-Up Darling, we see their relationship blossom on the back of a mutual love for design and clothes. He creates dolls while she wants to be a cosplayer. This gives us a unique, fun twist on the usual dynamic, and it's really rather adult when it comes to it. Rather than the usual trope of being too scared to talk to girls, the main character has a passion that's maybe taken the wrong way and shuts himself out because of it. However, the outgoing personality of the others will drag him into the real world and open him up. Definitely one for those who love cosplay. Precarious Woman Executive Miss Black General is a very long title, and it's a better of a title too. To be honest, I picked this up on a whim. The bright colours of Volume 1 attracted my eyes, and to be honest, I'm really glad I made the effort. A title that I feel will be overlooked due to not having a popular anime adaptation, Miss Black General takes the superhero tropes and turns it on its head. Rather than being brooding and serious, it looks more at the comic side of comic books. A young woman is madly in love with the superhero Brave Man, and what better way to get close to him? By becoming a villain. Of course. She takes up the mantle of Miss Black General, and here we follow her and her companions' escapades to try and take over the world. A huge amount of fun, and I would really recommend checking it out if you like superheroes and gag manga. The next title we have is one of the biggest names in the anime industry, Gundam, a franchise I've long adored. Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin is a retelling of the original Mobile Suit Gundam story, with added scenes and exposition that subsequent titles have expanded on. These releases are absolutely beautiful. Vertical doing an impressive job in getting them out to us, but what else can I say? It's Gundam. For anyone who is a fan of the franchise, these are definitely must-haves. But, admittedly, as much as I love Gundam The Origin, I think Gundam as a series is a better watch than a read. Next up is 2 titles in one, because I couldn't think of which series I preferred over the other. We have both Cells at Work and Cells at Work Code Black here. Taking place inside a sick body, the Cells at Work franchise focuses on the day-to-day lives of the cells, from the red cells distributing oxygen throughout the body to the white cells helping keep virus and bacteria at bay. Each of these titles are brilliant in their own right, as they focus on how the cells combat various diseases, from the common cold to hair loss to even cancer itself. While Cells at Work is a lot more positive as it takes place inside a relatively healthy body, it's Cells at Work Code Black that takes place inside a stressed, overworked and unhealthy body and probably relates more with adults. Both of these titles are well worth picking up, and if you enjoy one, you'll certainly enjoy the other. As for me, I'm still just trying to decide which one I love the most. Hey kids, remember the 90s? The world of arcades where titles such as Street Fighter and King of Fighters reigned supreme? Well, High Score Girl certainly does. Focusing on a young boy obsessed with games who befriends a young rich girl using games to escape from her problems. I really like this one. It hits a nice nostalgic spot that I've forgotten over the years. While the main character can be admittedly pretty annoying, I can't help but feel gripped with their problems. There's a lot of fun to be had with this one, and if you're a fan of arcade fighting games, then you'll have a good time with this title. Next up is one of the oldest manga on this list, and it's a belter. While I'm not familiar with all of Rumiko Takahashi's works, I can definitely confirm out of the ones I've read, Urusei Yatsura is by far my favourite. Although I've only read volume 1 of Viz's recent omnibus edition, I fell in love with the style and the characters. A pioneer for a lot of the Geek Gets Girl titles that we've seen so many of, it would be rude of me to be ignorant of the series as a whole. While I feel like the first half of volume 1 takes its time to get its feet off the ground, once it does, it works incredibly well. Lum is iconic and just as fun as I remember. My memories of the British dub way back in the early 2000s holding up, and honestly I just wish I had the space to hold more of this series. I definitely feel if I read more of this it would be in a lot of a higher position. One I think I'd pick up digitally and follow through on. If one were to have a manga dictionary and using the word hidden gem, then I feel like our next title would fit the bill perfectly. Animator doesn't even have a score on my anime list, despite being around for almost 6 years. A slice of life seinen manga which follows a young girl trying to make it in the anime industry. She doesn't have the skills but shows promise. This series brutally shows the truths of the animation industry, from the long hours and minimal pay which are skirted around in other titles. A title that industry veterans are taking notice of and instructing all newcomers to read, and thanks to its honesty, it's one that I've come to admire, and I'd love to see others check it out. If you have any interest in the anime industry, you need to read this title. The next installment covers a trio of titles, namely Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid and its 2 spin-off titles, Kana's Daily Life and Elma's Office Lady Diary, because I feel you can't have one without the other, nor is it fair to give a series 3 individual entries in a top list. Dragon Maid is that series that I probably wouldn't have even given a look at without the superb KyoAni adaptation, and one that if I did do a top 50 anime list, it would likely rank a lot higher than it has done here. However, the manga itself isn't anything to be sniffed at either. A slice of life that includes heartwarming family moments, a fun cast of characters and enough day-to-day slice of life happiness, it's one that I enjoy coming back to over and over. While I have to admit some of the content is a little bit extreme, which reduced its overall position, I'd be lying if I didn't say I'd enjoyed the spin-off for its good moments. With 2 fun spin-offs that only improve my opinion of the series as a whole, Dragon Maid is certainly a series that deserves a spot on my list. Ah yes, we come to Plussized Elf. Definitely a series that likely will throw off most manga fans and have them reaching for the comment section in a fit of anger that this made the list while more popular titles didn't. Why is Plussized Elf on this list when other titles didn't even make it? I don't know. I wanted to be honest with myself and putting series I found enjoyment with, and this one was certainly on the list. A fun enough story that knows its very existence is, quite frankly, a joke. For an ecchi, the characters are really well drawn, and of course the fact that the creator once did hentai isn't lost on us. Plussized Elf absolutely should not be on this list, but it is. The next series joins the throng of other titles asking the age-old question: why on earth does this not have an anime adaptation? Comey Can't Communicate was certainly a standout title when I first picked it up in 2019, and over the years I've continued to enjoy this series. Of course it has the odd lull, but its message is pretty pure. A young girl who struggles with basic communication is adored by everyone in school. She has a goal of gaining 100 true friends, and there are the hijinks along the way. There's so little to Comey Can't Communicate itself, however it continues to impress me whenever I come across it and how well it's done. It's simple, but it's pretty masterfully written. The next series is another that I wasn't really sure where to put. Fortunately for it, the one omnibus volume I read was incredibly good. Watercoy, Love is Hard for Otaku is such a charming series I can't not adore it. Adults adulting will always be titles that will be drawn over to kids trying to save the world. With Watercoy we have a group of adults. One, a Fujoshi who hides her lifestyle, the other who is a gamer who is more than happy with being open about his lifestyle. They're in love with each other. What ensures is a host of relatable stories of theirs and other otaku relationships, kind of like Big Bang Theory, only way more respectful and instead normalising things rather than poking fun at it with a laugh track. Much like Urusei Yatsura, this one would be no doubt way higher on this list if I could just find copies of Volume 2 onwards, never mind just reading them. Ah yes, Monster Musume, another title that probably confuses people as to why it's on this list. Never mind being as high as it is. It's a title I've often discussed on this channel and one I've had a lot of fun with. While it is an ecchi harem, it does give focus in trying to tackle themes such as racism, the meaning of life, and death itself, in a roundabout way, and unlike most ecchi manga, I do feel like the author is trying to go that extra mile to make these characters likeable, and more than just TNA. Of course, that was until recent volumes, which the series has kind of just gone off that end and focuses almost entirely on TNA with little else. Ah, how the mighty have fallen. Still, the first 10 or so volumes are a lot of fun, and Spider-Girl is still best girl. Another title I don't really see enough love for, and I think it was actually my first shoujo title that I read from start to finish. My love story tells the story of gentle giant Takeo Goda, who doesn't have much luck with girls as they all fall in love with his best friend. This all changes when he saves Rinko Yamato, a petite, shy girl. They fall in love and honestly, this story is just so pure. I loved every moment of it. All of the main cast are, quite frankly, incredible. I really like Takeo's parents too. It's a really uplifting series and definitely one that I'd recommend more people check out at some point. Actually, it was one that I was always quite sad with that there was only one season for it. Huge shame. Ah, Gangster. The one series that I, quite frankly, often forget that I even own. And quite frankly, that's really underselling it. Honestly, to this day, I really do not understand why Gangster was never up there as a must-read sign-in title when it does so many things so good. Handyman Nick and Warwick take the jobs nobody else wants to, in a shady city full of vile men and petty thieves. If you like your movies with a lot of action and explosions, you'll probably enjoy this one too. It's one that I got rather addicted to a few years ago and have slowly started to rebuy it. If you like your violent action seinen, this is easily one of the best ones out there. Our next title is the new Shonen Jump Golden Boy in Chainsaw Man. A lot of people keep telling me to check this one out, but I was actually quite early in on this one. What can I say about Chainsaw Man that other people haven't? Well, it's consistent. While it was rarely my favourite thing each week when it ran Shonen Jump, it was always consistently good. While I'm personally not huge on the over-the-top gore that similar titles present, Chainsaw Man made up for it by having a lot of laughs, a lot of fun characters, and to be honest, a lot of shocking moments. Chainsaw Man is often praised as being an ale fit for Shonen Jump, but to be honest, it still fits the core themes of friendship, adventure, coming of age and comedy that Jump titles adhere to. It's just very gory on top of it all. Consistently good is something that not many titles can really admit that they can hold that. Because Chainsaw Man can, it's worthy of being on my list. The next series we come to is one that I really adored over the last few years. The Quintessential Quintuplets is a will they, won't they, done right. A young man tutors a group of identical quintuplets, but from the start we know the protagonist will marry one of them. Unlike a lot of similar series which follow the usual ecchi tropes, I feel like Quintuplets is a bit more honest with itself. It's not doing anything particularly new, but it does what it does rather well. It's one of those series where you'll be happy with, quite frankly, any of the girls marrying Futaro. Quintessential Quintuplets is an all-round good romantic comedy harem series. Each of the characters are developed enough and it doesn't fall into the trap of adding more girls for the sake of adding more girls. Definitely one I'd recommend checking out if you want something like that. It took me a long time to decide where I really wanted to place my lesbian experience with loneliness and its sequel title, My Solo Exchange Diary. But here it is, slap bang in the middle of this list. An autobiography of the life of Kabi Nagata and is an awkward tale of grown up. Taking a serious look at sexuality, depression and loneliness, it's far cry from your standard fare. But this is what makes the series all the better. Rather than pushing problems onto a character and instead explaining through the author's personal experiences, everything feels so very real. It's definitely one of those titles I'd recommend to everybody who wants something relatable and something more meaty than the woes of a teenage shonen protagonist. Ichi F, a graphic memoir, telling the world about the cleanup of the Fukushima nuclear plant after the disaster in 2011. One of the few reliable ways the public were able to understand what was happening in the cleanup site. Tatsuya details the daily lives of the workers inside. Attention to detail is key with this one, as even the most minute detail is covered, and gives you a new appreciation for the hard work that goes in for sites like these. In a medium focus on superheroes and supernatural heroes, it's refreshing to see some real life heroes portrayed. Ichi F would fit in anyone's collection who wants something different from the normal. A must read in my opinion. A more recent read is next with New Game, and this is one that I wished I got into way earlier. I watched the anime some time ago and was rather impressed, but it took some time for me to go back and actually read the manga. New Game is a cute girls doing cute things slice of life title. It won't be the last on this list, I can tell you that. But this one is a rather good one. Focusing on game development in the industry, it definitely resonates with those who live and breathe games. But not only that, it also manages to appeal to anyone just working in an office environment with relatable content. It's the perfect definition of a series I can just relax with on a night and enjoy it for what it is. A whole lot of fun. I think the next one may be the oldest title on this list, but I feel like it's one that absolutely deserves to be on here. Tezuka's Blackjack still holds up rather well today. Episodic in nature, it focuses on an illegal surgeon with the hands of God. A lot of chapters focus on the darker side of humanity, while another can have you laughing, the next a romance, while the one after a tragedy. Easily my favourite of Tezuka's works, going as far as being hilarious on one panel while the next having an accurate commentary on what's wrong with society. While this may have been written in the 70s, a lot of this still holds up today. Hopefully we'll see a reprint of this one in the future. Barakamon is one of those titles where I looked at it originally and thought it would never be for me. But after watching the anime many moons ago, I realised I needed more of this, and I really wasn't disappointed. A young calligrapher is banished to a small island where everyone knows everyone. A typical fish out of water story. He soon befriends the townsfolk and the local kids and starts settling into island life. This is just another one of those titles that just, quite frankly, puts a smile on my face whenever I read it. And it won't be the last time I use that as a reason for the title being on this list. It's right up my alley of being rather relaxing, but also being pretty damn hilarious at times. Another one that I feel is vastly underappreciated these days. We are now into the top 20, and next up we have a series that I adore the anime for, and the manga, from what I've read, is incredibly good too. Kaiji, or Gamble and Apocalypse Kaiji, is probably one of the most exciting and on-edge series I've ever read. A down-and-out delinquent is forced into a multitude of increasingly risky games in order to try and cover its debts. If you've ever read Kakaguri, then turn it up a notch. Games can last dozens of chapters, and honestly I never expected it to be as good as it could be. An incredibly tense but exciting series with a unique art direction I look forward to reading all of what Kaiji has to offer. Probably the most recent title on this list, but don't let that fool you. This has the makings of being a true classic. I first heard whisperings of Spy X Family, or Spy Family as it were, shortly after Volume 1 released in Japan. Hearing how it sold silly numbers, I was curious. What we have is a rather fantastic title that mixes spies, assassinations and general childhood goofiness all in one. As if James Bond and Yutsuba had a combination. You can go from one chapter focusing on terrorists using bombs attached to dogs, to the next one just being about kids being kids. It's one of those titles where everything down on paper, it shouldn't work. Yet it does, and brilliantly so. Perhaps I'm being a bit kind to this series, putting it above a lot of titles that have had far more time to build themselves up, but I feel Spy Family is worth it. It's been consistently great, and I expect only better things as it continues. Of course, it could just explode in my face and become incredibly bad. Who knows? Another series that will no doubt have people scratching their heads of why it's in this position is Himoto Umaruchan. You know, the one with the potato girl who wants cola and crisps and will make a scene if she doesn't get it. I don't know what it is about Umaruchan that just delights me, but it's one of those series that I've enjoyed immensely since picking it up a few years ago. This, much like many others on this list, lands in the I love to chill and read this one. And unlike other series, I never feel pressured to go ahead and read this one. Fun from start to finish, I can't help but love this series and am more than happy to have it on this list. Definitely one worth checking out if you want a gag manga. What if? What if? What if? That is the question presented by my next title, Tokyo Taradeva Girls. This one really surprised me as I never expected to love it as much as I did. But hey, I feel all the more better for reading it. Tokyo Taradeva Girls feels so grounded in real life woes, asking the question a lot of people, myself included, often ask ourselves. What if I did this? What if I did that? What if? What if? It introduced me to the brilliance of Akiko Higashimura and her range of works, and once again, it's adults adulting in an adult world. Something that never ceases to impress me. This is one of the greats, and probably my favourite romance. The word masterpiece is thrown around all too often these days, with very few series matching that actual title. Fortunately, our next title actually holds this as part of its title itself. Aria The Masterpiece is a title that I fell in love with as soon as I opened the pages. A relaxing affair, focusing on the training of a young gondola on the planet Aqua and their day-to-day adventures, so to speak. Easily one of the most beautiful and tranquil series I've ever laid eyes on. One that I feel could be higher on the list, would I be able to find the missing volume from my collection. Alas, I can only judge what I've read, and what I have read was very good indeed. The Masterpiece releases looking absolutely gorgeous, and only a snippet of the delights that await inside. Certainly a title that, once I do find the remainder of, will no doubt hit the top 10 in future videos. It's time we once again reach into the vault of Shonen Jump, as the next title we have is Assassination Classroom. What happens when you're a school kid and your teacher is a tentacled monster who is going to destroy the entire planet in a year unless you kill him? Well, learn of course. Assassination Classroom manages to hit almost everything right. A fun main character and an impressive expansive collection of side characters, all of which get their own turn in the limelight. I really grew attached to the kids and the teachers in this one, and if I'm honest, when it ended, I had a mixture of I'm glad this didn't drag on, and please God, don't let it end. If you have a Shonen Jump subscription, go check this one out. I feel it's quite underrated. Another recent title for myself, and one that I knew as soon as people mentioned it, I knew I would love it, and they were right. Girls' Last Tour is essentially a cute girls doing cute things at the end of the world. There's so much hope and optimism in this series, yet it also manages to be rather simple in its storytelling. It's one that I'm really trying to savour, as there's only 6 volumes. Sometimes the shorter series are perfection themselves, and Girls' Last Tour manages to hit everything it does incredibly well. Definitely one to check out if you want a very short but very complete series. Once again we come across the words food, adventure and comedy, as next up is Delicious and Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshi, as some of you may know it. The concept is something that I'm sure most fans of Dungeons and Dragons or RPGs in general may have thought of at some point. What if one were to eat the monsters? Having to save their companion, a group of dungeon explorers are forced to answer this question, presenting us with a fantastic tale that not only blends action, adventure and dungeon crawling, but each story arc also focusing on a particular creature and how they can be turned into food. It's not a series I see a lot of people talking about these days, but almost everybody who has dared to pick this one up loves it, and I'm certainly one of those. An absolute joy whenever a new volume is released. Our next title is Nichijou, My Ordinary Life, a gag series that the first time I read it, I wasn't entirely impressed with. However, upon rereading it, I soon fell into its trappings. This is a series that I've read numerous times and always managed to get something new out of, telling the not so ordinary lives of some ordinary girls and the world around them. This series ranges from crazy to stupid to pretty much irrelevant, but it's one of those ones I always have time for. With jokes hitting on every single page, it's one I can't help but love. It's worth mentioning that the mangaka's current series, City, is also adored by myself. However, it doesn't set itself too far away from the original that I could offer it as a separate installment in this list. Still bloody fantastic though. Number 11, and we have the mouthful of a title. No matter how I look at it, it's you guys' fault I'm not popular. Or as I'll call it, much like the anime, Watamote. This is the series that really got me back into collecting manga on a whole, after checking out its anime some time ago. It's the story of a young, unpopular girl whom, once she enters high school, expects everything to come up roses for her. I mean, that's what happens in her favourite series after all. Reality isn't quite like that, however. What I love about this series is that it really does feel like we've gone on a long journey with our protagonist. While most slice of life series usually struggle after the initial 10 or 15 volumes, this one really feels like it's continuing for the long haul, and it's been good the entire time. Quite frankly, I'm all for that. There's not a single volume or arc in this series which I'd consider weak in this one. Finally, we hit my top 10. Next up, we have what is in my opinion the strongest of current Shonen Jump, Dr. Stone. While the start of this series was, in my opinion, rather weak, it soon blossomed into a rather exhilarating series where I just crave the next chapter immediately after the last. The fact that we have a battle science series rather than, demon or monster slaying makes this one stand out to me. The comedy is absolutely on point and I just love the amount of detail that comes into this series. It's also incredibly refreshing to see an ever-expanding cast of characters where most, if not everyone, has an important role to play. Dr. Stone is the one series that I just can't get enough of right now, which easily lets it slide into the top 10. Number 9, and we go back to one of the very first series that got me into manga, the laugh out loud comedy Azumanga Dial. Interestingly, while this was one that I loved when I was younger, I found it still holds up incredibly well today, possibly because it feels quite layered. The antics of the schoolgirls themselves are always charming, but as you grow older you start to relate to the lives and the wars of some of the teachers themselves. It's one of those series that just sticks with you and you can always go back and have a good time with it. Although I must admit the spine of the Yen Press re-release always felt like it would snap at any second. It feels quite threatening. Number 8, and we have Silver Spoon, a title I honestly never expected to enjoy as much as I did. Created by the legendary Hiromu Arakawa, who also created Full Metal Alchemist, this series really impressed me. A young man, Yugo Hachiken, fails the exams for the high school he wanted to get into, and instead opts for what he thinks is going to be the easy option, Uezo Agricultural High School. From the very first chapter I was hooked with this one. But once again, a fish out of water series in which the main character struggles with adapting to farm life. But it really works. Much like Barakamon, the creator has drawn from personal experiences grown up and dares to ask some questions that we don't necessarily think about. It's not a green manga, more of a food manga, but it does have the main character question the way of the world and the people around him. It gives us hard-hitting facts about the economy and the way of life that initially seems like it'll come up roses. Not necessarily, but it's fantastic for that aspect. Everyone has that one series they'd love to own in a physical form. For some, it's Kingdom. Others, it's Hajime no Ippo. For me, it's Space Brothers. For a long time now I've been on that Space Brothers train. a series by Chuya Koyama that really focuses on the dreams of young men. As children, both Muta Namba and his brother Hibito witness what they believe to be a UFO. Inspired by this, they dream of becoming astronauts. Sadly, the real world doesn't always follow the dreams of the many. However, Hibito has actually managed to become an astronaut, assigned to go to the moon. Muta, however, is about to stop at his dead-end job and start following his dream. I think what I love about this series is, once again, it's adults adulting, but also reinforces the notion that you're never too old to learn new tricks. Everything about this series is so in-depth, and it's honestly refreshing to see the subject matter taken seriously. All of these characters feel incredibly real, and it's an absolute pleasure to see everything pan out. There's about 40 volumes, and quite frankly, zero chance of it ever getting a physical release, but it's definitely worth your time investing in this one. I can't recommend this one enough. The next one is, well, it's Prison School. Prison School is that little series that I expected to be little more than the odd boob joke here and there, but so much more. A group of boys attend a girls-only school. They immediately believe they live like kings, yet pretty much straight away they're caught peeping and facing either expulsion or confinement in the on-site prison. It's an interesting premise and one that I absolutely adored, showing that time and time again, actions have consequences. It's well known that the creator was previously advised to add more ecchi to their titles to make them sell, and they did that with this one. However, going immediately in the opposite direction. It's well known that the creator was previously advised to add more ecchi to their titles to make it sell, and they did that with this one. However, going immediately in the opposite direction. Rather than titular ecchi, we instead have grotesque ecchi and scenarios, giving us, honestly, a more unique title than I've seen elsewhere. Everything about Prison School just somehow works, and it's a better series for that. And personally, I'm one of the few people who actually enjoyed the ending for this one, even if it did come on rather quickly. We are now into the final 5, and next up we have Golden Kamuy. Easily my favourite violent seinen title, and the one I often recommend to newcomers to the demographic. A historical adventure that has a bunch of soldiers and convicts fighting over hidden treasure. Added into that we have romance, over-the-top action, laugh-out-loud moments, genuine historic facts, and it even becomes a food manga. It's a little bit of everything, and it manages everything so incredibly well. With an ever-expanding cast of characters, nearly all of which are superb, it became a real treat whenever I get to read more of it. We move from the outdoors to, well, the outdoors, with my favourite seinen title of all time. And it's a comfy one. Laid Back Camp is the poster child of a series you can crawl into bed with and relax with after a long and hard day. A young girl enjoys going winter camping. However, one day she befriends another girl who's just getting into it. But she adores food. They strike up an unlikely friendship and enjoy their days camping together. It sounds minimal, but that's exactly what it is. A minimal title that doesn't really require much explanation. Each chapter focuses on a different area, or even just a different bit of camping gear, and it's all hunky-dory and nice about it. You aren't going to get your rained out and flooded camping grounds, you won't have to brave the public toilets. Everything about this series is nice and relaxing, just as camping should be. We are into the final 3 now, and the next one is one that I've kept for years and years. It proved to me that sports manga can be amazing and continues to be a firm favourite whenever I reread it. We have Eyeshield 21, the manga about American football of all things. Something that I can safely admit that I had zero interest in before now. I just adore everything about this series, from each and all of the characters being fantastic to making a sport that I have no concept of, massively entertaining and incredibly intense. I know there's a lot of other fantastic sports manga out there, however, none of the ones I've read have came close to this. While I do agree that nostalgia is a big part of that, I do genuinely believe that there's something special with Eyeshield 21. Number 2, and it can only be Yutsuba or Yutsuba 2. After rereading Azumanga Dial a few years ago, I realised I really wanted more. and a lot of people had mentioned Yutsuba to be something worth checking out. And they weren't wrong. Yutsuba is one of those titles that just makes you smile whenever you read it. Incredibly easy to read and ultimately relaxing. The story of a young girl growing up and discovering the world, things we all take as the normal. This wasn't anything I expected to be hyped about, but honestly, I was so wrong. I feel it's a title that you'll probably appreciate more either when you're younger and trying to get into manga, or when you're older and just can't be bothered with battle shonen and gore anymore. And finally, we come to number 1. And of course, it's One Piece. Was there any doubt? One Piece has been with me for nearly 20 years now, and it remains a firm favourite. It's been with me for the good and also the bad times, the ever constant in one's life. While personally I do agree that the post-time skip of One Piece hasn't been quite as good as pre-time skip, I've never felt the series has ever been bad, just sometimes disappointing, but it remains week on week something for me to look forward to. Honestly, I very much doubt anything would even top this series for me. Unless something catastrophically bad happens in the last few arcs like they kill off Nico Robin or something. One Piece remains my favourite series of all time, something I could quite happily read over and over without any complaint. Some people argue and complain about the length, but like most One Piece fans, I'm personally 100% sure not ready for this adventure to end quite yet. And that's my list. Thank you everyone who has gotten to the end, and feel free to shout at me to read the current popular title in the comment section that I no doubt left off. If you like what I do, then please do leave a like, subscribe, and check out some other videos on my channel. It really helps out. Goodbye for now.